Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, that perfect companion for the kitchen knife, the cutting board. So I've been doing a series of videos about kitchen knives, and as I was going along, I thought, well, what would be a cool little companion to this? Cutting boards. Woodworking is definitely far down on the list of my skills, but I thought it would be a cool project, and so you can kind of follow along with me and learn as I learn. If you make kitchen knives, a cutting board is a natural companion, and they can also be a great project to personalize your kitchen. 2 points about cutting boards. First, you want to make sure that everything you use is food safe. This means you want to use food safe glue and food safe finishes. Second point, just be aware you'll end up with about as much weight in sawdust as in cutting boards, so don't scrimp when you're buying lumber. However much you think you need, get more. Speaking of lumber, I'm using 8/4 hard maple, also known as sugar maple, and 8/4 walnut, which I bought in 8 to 10 foot sections. Both are classic cutting board woods, hard, durable, and they don't impart nasty flavors to foods. I paid around $5 a board foot for the hard maple, a little under 10 a board foot for the walnut. This gave me enough lumber to make 5 or 6 cutting boards at a cost of around $100. As far as tools go, it's pretty tool intensive. I'm using a planer, a bandsaw, a disc grinder, a power sander, and a router. You could also use a table saw, a chop saw, and a radial arm saw. Oh, and you'll need approximately 8 billion clamps, bar clamps or pipe clamps, because you'll be clamping long items. One of the eternal and immutable laws of the universe, and you can find this inscribed on the walls of the tombs of the pharaohs, and I believe Ecclesiastes had a couple of passages on the subject, is this: you cannot own too many clamps. Cannot. Unfortunately, I rarely clamp anything bigger than a knife handle, so most of my clamp supply is intended for small items. As a result, I lost a lot of time here due to an insufficiency of bar clamps. Go forth and buy clamps. So it is written, so let it be done. Anyway, basic idea is this. We're going to saw up the lumber into strips, then glue those strips together, plane this laminated chunk of wood, chop that up crossways, re-glue it, replane it ad nauseum, or variations thereof. You'll see how it works, but there are a million different ways of doing it. So this video isn't a cookbook so much as a quick overview of what I did in the making of a number of slightly different variations on this same theme. Let's get started. I'll begin by cutting strips of wood on my bandsaw from flat planed lumber. Now, a table saw would be much better, but my shop is really short on real estate, so I'm just using the bandsaw. I've cut the strips about 1.5 inches wide. I'll also make a couple that will use thinner strips too, and you'll see how that works. Once I've cut them, I'll rotate them 90 degrees and then glue them together on the planed surfaces. I'm applying tons of glue on both surfaces. You want clean, fully glued joints. Any gaps in your joints will allow food and gunk to stick in your cutting board. Don't want that. Time out. Let's talk glue. I'm using a popular wood glue known as Titebond 3. The material data sheet says that it won't cause tumors to sprout out of your head, and it's been approved by the FDA for indirect food contact. So I feel pretty good about using it. It's very strong glue and it's water resistant. Whatever you do, don't use Titebond 1 or other non-water resistant glues. I think the reasons for that don't bear explaining. Now some clamping. Clamp the hell out of it. I let the glue cure overnight per the manufacturer's recommendations. Next, I'll run these new laminated hunks of wood that I've made the previous day through the planer. I'm looking to get them flat and the same width. Note that I have also added sacrificial pieces on the ends of the sections to avoid snipe. If you haven't used a planer, they plane the first couple of inches slightly deeper than the rest of the piece, also the last couple of inches. This is called snipe. In theory, you can control this through good planing technique, but the tolerances we need for making butcher blocks are extremely tight. So I use sacrificial stock to be dead sure that I'm going to get absolutely perfect glue joints. This is an enormous pain in the neck, and you'll spend a ton of time gluing sacrificial pieces on, then cutting them right back off again after you're done. Tip: glue the sacrificial bits on with 5-minute epoxy. That'll get you back in the game quicker. But wait more than 5 minutes to use them. 5-minute epoxy has a working time of 5 minutes, not a cure time. Big difference. Bottom line though, you don't need a perfectly cured glue joint, so you can start planing a lot quicker with epoxy than if you used wood glue. I use a disc grinder to square the edges of all these pieces prior to gluing on the sacrificial piece. Now, there are surely much better ways of doing this, but it's what I've got. Hey, I'm a knife maker, not a woodworker. So there's some pretty basic woodworking tools that I don't necessarily have in my arsenal. Quick safety note about using a disc grinder the way I'm using it. You may notice that I'm using both sides of the disc grinder. In other words, I'm not grinding just on the face where the disc is coming down into the body of the grinder. I'm also using it on the far face, which grinds upward. This is an excellent way to launch pieces of wood across your shop at high velocity, break your nose, blind yourself, smash stuff in your shop, and so on. Disc grinders are totally not made to be used this way. Let me say that again. They are not made to be used this way. But I do it anyway. If you're going to play with fire like me, the key is that you have to put lots of downward pressure on the part of the work touching the upward turning side of the disc. All of that said, I do this a lot, and I haven't hurled a piece of wood in years because it's part of my technique with the tool, and I pay really close attention to what I'm doing. But still, don't do it. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm doing several different designs, so I'll do one set that's all maple, one that's all walnut, and one that alternates, all with these same size strips of wood, so I can kind of assembly line the process. Once I've planed them, I'll take them out and cut each of these strips crossways. On most of these boards, we'll be making end grain designs. So, however long you cut these strips, that will be the maximum thickness of your cutting board. Now, we'll flip these pieces that we've just cut 90 degrees once again and glue them together on the faces that we just planed. Again, this glue joint needs to be really tight. That's why it's important that your planing be very true. The end grain will now be revealed, forming the face of your butcher block. So, I'm not going to show too many steps after this point. You've got the basic idea. Essentially what you're doing is you're chopping stuff up, you glue it, you plane it, chop it up again, re-glue, re-plane. Now you can do all kinds of cool things this way, changing orientations, thicknesses, wood types, and so on to create interesting designs. As you're doing all this mixing and matching, always be aware of the grain of your wood and aim to make it look as nice as possible. Even using a simple square pattern, there are a multitude of effects you can achieve just by finding interesting orientations to the grain. So once I got the body of all these blocks done, I enclosed them in wooden frames. The frame increases the durability of the block and dresses it up a little. If I had it all to do over again, I would also drill through and put some dowels in to increase the strength a little bit. Nothing real special here. I'm just squaring off the sides, flattening everything up, and then gluing strips on the outside. I did my maple board with curly maple, and then this one here I framed in curly cherry. Once I was finished, I got busy with the router. Using various sized roundover bits, I knocked off the corners of the blocks. Sharp edges are likely to get chipped off in the kitchen. I did one with an 1/8 inch roundover bit, and then the rest I did with the 1/4 inch radius. And personally, I think that the 1/4 inch looked best, but everybody's eye is different. Once we've finished all that up, lots of tedious sanding. On the bright side, end grain in particular will reward all this tedium with a nice glassy surface. I went up to 800 grit on the tops of the blocks, but stopped at 400 on the sides. Finally, I apply some finish. Again, you obviously want something that will be food safe, that will make the block look nice, and ideally that will preserve the appearance over time. Now, it's kind of hard to find any one finish that will accomplish all of this, but that's sort of what you're aiming for. Some possibilities include walnut oil, mineral oil, beeswax, and various mixtures of them. You can also use shellac, polyurethane, and other film-type finishes. But anything that builds up a film will ultimately just get hacked to bits the first time you cut anything, so to me, what's the point? At the end of the day, a butcher block's just a tool. My feeling is you're chasing the wind if you're trying to keep a butcher block looking perfect throughout its lifetime. So I'm just putting walnut oil on these. Incidentally, the end grain in particular will drink up tons of oil. See, I'm literally just pouring it on the surface of the block and it just soaks it right up. FYI, once it's in there, it takes a while to stabilize, so oil will be wicking out for a long time. If you're making a butcher block as a gift, don't plan on wrapping it up the next day or all that oil will soak right through the wrapping paper. So, here are the results. I made 3 cutting boards this way, each of which used the classic butcher block square approach. One of them used all maple, one of them all walnut, and one of them was a sort of checkerboard thing that used 2 different kinds of wood. Now, I thought that checkerboard effect looked a little garish, so I thought I'd try something a little different with that one. So what I did is I trimmed the whole block on a bias and then put a border around it. It either looks like I didn't know what I was doing and made the whole thing cockeyed, or it's kind of interesting looking. Well, it's up to you, but hey, if you don't try stuff, you'll just do the same crap over and over. Incidentally, if doing the butcher block approach with all these squares that you have to cut and flip and flip and flip, if that routine seems like a pain in the neck, there's no kitchen policeman who's going to come in and arrest you for not using end grain. So here's a much simpler approach. Basically, I just cut the wood into strips, planed it, flipped it over sideways, and glued it up together, and then planed that flat. So it doesn't expose the end grain, but you get a kind of interesting little pattern. I also did one that didn't use square blocks. I cut up sort of random sizes in rows of varying widths, then sliced and diced and flipped and planed and all that same stuff until I got a fun design with it. This project killed an entire weekend and a little bit of time beyond that, but I'll have Christmas presents for a bunch of my friends, something a little more personal than a Target gift card. Make one for your wife or your personal chef. I know I did. Interested in finding out how the knives were made that are shown with these cutting boards? Click here. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and check out my website, waltersorrellsblades.com, where you can find more of my work. You'll also find plenty more videos there that you can't find on YouTube with very, very detailed information about all aspects of Japanese blade making. Also, like me on Facebook at Walter Sorrells Blades.